Hi, I'm Dustin Kirby with Foundational Facility Management, and this is my wife, Stephanie Kirby. And today we're coming here to talk to you about church budgeting for your facility assets. And while we just planned on our usual take, jumping in and going through and then answering questions, this is the same week of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And we wanted to talk about some things that are on our hearts and on our minds as well, that we think go hand in hand with not only the budgeting, but the facility management of the church. Stephanie, I don't know if you wanted to start or do you want me to?
Why don't you start?
Okay. So Stephanie and I realize, hey, every Christian has a responsibility to share the gospel. And we also realize that our talents, honestly, are assisting a lot of churches by helping them have a facility that's welcoming and inviting. And we really feel like out of this horrible tragedy, that not even a tragedy, this was an act of murder. So out of this horribleness, that I think God is really going to use this to bring a lot of people to the churches. I think that there's an opportunity for Christians to continue to speak the truth. And I think that we have to do that in a way that we're not violent, that we're not aggressive, but instead that we're welcoming. I'm hoping, and what we both talked about is what we think is going to happen is that churches are going to have even a bigger opportunity over the next year and the coming years to welcome the community into their churches. And we hope in our little small way to be able to help assist those facilities to be as ready as possible to be welcoming. The people are always going to be the most important. You and your church staff, wherever you're at, are going to make the biggest impact. But in the small way, your facility is a small part of that staff. Your facility can be a welcoming facility that creates a welcoming atmosphere, that provides different opportunities for groups to meet or just to talk. Or sometimes some of the facilities might even have a little sporting complex. But whatever it is, I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are coming into the buildings. And if we can be as ready as possible, if our buildings can be maintained, if they can be safe and welcoming, and we've got good Christian people out there, I think that the impact, of Christ followers is just going to grow. I think we have a huge responsibility. That individual, Charlie Kirk, was willing to put himself out there all the time. There's many other Christians that are doing that. And, this is one way that we feel that we can help. And we know that, hey, you have to run the day-to-day operations of the church. And while we have, our business, some things are bigger than business. So we just really wanted to talk about that really before jumping into the budget. But did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, so we've been talking about how we've noticed a lot on social media, and you're probably seeing the same thing too. A lot of people who are claiming they've been atheist or not religious in the past, and how this is really helping them kind of see differently, and they're starting to ask questions. People who have been away from the church for a while are wanting to come back to it. I think in the past 5 years, we had COVID, which kind of drove people out of the church, and I don't think everyone returned. And now I think this is impacting people in an even larger way, where we do think, from what we're seeing and hearing, there's going to be people coming back in. And while the church is not a building, your building is one of your biggest assets you have to reach the community. And have open doors and create space for people to come in to explore kind of what's happening there and what everything's about. And I know we're talking about budgeting today, but I think, it's just really important thinking about the facility budget to also be considering the ways you can use your building for the community, not just, I know a lot of churches will say, if you're just attending on Sunday and not reading your Bible, praying, or doing anything the rest of the week, that's not really what we're supposed to be doing. And I think the same thing works for our church building. If we're only opening our doors on Sunday for service, we're missing a huge opportunity to be bringing the community in for things that might feel a little less threatening for them to come in, get comfortable, get to know people and connect with you, your volunteers, other people in your building, and kind of start to build those relationships that can grow into something greater.
Yeah, and I think that a little bit to, I guess, know about us is I've been in facility management for over 20 years, in churches, in government, and the private industry. And Stephanie has also worked in many different facets, including churches. And one of her big, I guess, passions has been church events and ministry. And she's actually used that in the past with a church that when we lived in Michigan that we attended from us being kids, but into adulthood. But she actually set up a bunch of events, and actually it was great. A lot of the community came that some of them might not have came otherwise. And the building and the grounds were alive. They were alive with the community, and it was just different events where, you know, they could come in and be welcomed, and some of them continued coming and became regular members. Some of them did not, but we definitely were able to help provide a welcoming, I guess, a welcoming facility. And as we said, today is about budget, and in no way can we sit here and tell you exactly how you need to be spending your budget, nor should we or do we want to. But one small part of that budget we know is in your building assets, so your M&R, your maintenance and repair. And to prepare for that, it's important to start preparing now for next year and the years that follow. So we're hoping that with having a tighter rein on your budget and maintenance and repair, hopefully it'll allow all the churches to spend some of that extra funds that maybe would have been allocated for this, maybe just reaching the community. Whatever it might be, if we're able to help in any small way, then we'd be thrilled to do that. So just kicking off, before we even get started, like, a lot of people wonder, like, where do I even start? A lot of churches, of schools and government agencies that I've helped with facility maintenance planning don't actually have an organized plan. So when you're at that point and you're just doing reactive maintenance, it's really hard to plan your budget because you don't know what's going to happen or what to expect. But to give you some numbers off, from the beginning, is most churches need to plan for $5 to $8 per square foot for their maintenance and repair budget. That includes your utilities. But additionally, above that, it's another $1 to $3 per year to plan for your capital replacements. We'll kind of get into the life cycle replacement planning into this also. But if you think about it like that, you're looking at anywhere from $6 to $11 per square foot for your budget, just for planning for your maintenance and repair and your building assets. So we're going to go through some different parts of planning for that, of where you can even get started, and then we'll answer a couple questions at the end. But I guess we'll go ahead and jump in. So the way that you actually can plan for your budget is two things. First, you have to know, where am I starting from? Stephanie and I always tell anyone we talk to, you cannot maintain what you don't know you have. It's the same thing with the budget. You can't plan your budget if you don't know what building assets you have and what condition they're in, what's their age, how many of them are there, all of that stuff. So you got to do two things. You have to get a good inventory of your building assets. And that means, at the minimum, the make, the model, and either the manufacturing year of the asset or the install date of the asset if it's something like a roof. Jointly, something that we really push is historical data. You want to take that and you can see, okay, this is about what I'm spending on my utilities annually. I like to really break that down and actually like to see monthly and then seasonally, depending on what part of the country you're from. Maybe you've got 4 seasons. Maybe you mainly are in Florida and you don't have much of a winter, but it's a really quick way to identify where you're having issues and maybe where you're excelling. Of course, there's inflation. So each year your utility costs usually go up, but along the way, you can really see if, okay, in the spring, like the other years, maybe you're averaging approximately a 3% increase on your utilities. And then that winter, you see it spiked to utilities are costing 20% more. This is this is one area that your budget really, really can be affected. And this is where the financial part of facility management comes into play, because it's not going to lie to you. Those numbers are being affected for a reason. More than likely, if the other seasons are pretty close to the same inflation rate year over year, and then you've got a spike to your 20% over, you have an issue in your building. Like I said, if it's the winter, maybe your HVAC equipment is not working efficiently and it's having to work harder and run longer. Maybe your door weather stripping needs to be replaced, or your window weather stripping. It can be a multitude of different things, but those numbers are going to tell you a story if you're willing to read that story. And then once you see that, that's whenever you can start diving into finding out more of the details, follow that back, and kind of clear that up. So
can I interject? Just from like coming into not having all the facility background that Dustin has. When I started to learn this, it took me a little bit to get like what the assets were. So if you're not as familiar with all the lingo for the facility industry, an asset inventory is simply having a list of what are your HVAC units, what is your water heater, your drinking fountains, all those type of things, a list of them. And we have worked with churches in the past. It's things I think you even know, but then you don't know maybe the exact location of them, how many you have, when you got it, how old it is. All of that goes into like starting to build a realistic budget. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. No, I appreciate that. And Stephanie's talking in nice plain terms and that, because that's very important.
And one more thing is, I think it's easy for people to understand this. A lot of churches hold like financial planning seminars and training and stuff. And it's the same thing in the financial world. And when you make a budget, like a lot of people are scared to create a budget because you have to look at, what is the reality of your situation? What debt do you have? What are your expenses? And you have to get real with it. But until you actually do that, you can't be realistic with what your goals and plans are, because you don't know what the reality of the situation is. And that's what we see a lot at churches is they don't really know what the reality of their facility expenses are. Or they budget for the upcoming year kind of on a wish and a dream of what you hope it is or think it is, but without really knowing the first emergency that comes along can totally bust your budget. And then you're stuck having to shuffle stuff around.
I think that's a great, example of a budget being busted. We worked at a church where every year they'd be so frustrated because their budget would not work out accurately in the maintenance and repair part at all. So they would take what happened the previous year, and that's what they would plan for the budget. And then there were a bunch of spikes that year. So the following year, they increased the budget that much. And then sometimes, we actually set aside too much for this. The reason for that was kind of what we were talking about. They didn't know exactly what their facility assets were. They knew obviously that they had an air conditioning system and they had a contract with a local company that would come and do a little bit like the spring repair and maintenance, and they had those types of things, but they didn't know what they actually had as, in asset inventory. So in the industry, we always, it's preferred method of having a work order management system, or some of us call it a CMMS, which is a computerized maintenance management system.
Simple terms.
Yeah, simple
A
terms.
task list.
Yeah,
right?
all that is it's a system that you can put all of your assets in, and you could put in there what the make, the model, and the year that it was manufactured or installed is, and then any expenses that are related to that asset, you can actually assign to that asset. So 5 years down the road, you can see what that particular asset is costing you. Additionally, you could put photos of the asset in there so it's easy to find. And what's so important is this allows you to build out a preventive maintenance system, because once you know what assets you have, you actually can work with a trusted professional to build out a preventive maintenance system. So this has to be done for this asset every month, every quarter, whatever it might be, depending on the asset, and you know what to expect in that way. So that's getting off the budget a little
Oh
bit.
yeah, I was just gonna say, last month, the training was on asset inventory.
Yes.
So if you're interested in more information on that, we'll put a link in the description, go back and watch that.
Yeah, but the reason I was actually going over that just now is because what I was talking about, like our church, the budget was being busted every year. And the reason is they didn't have a list of their building assets. And I mean, even on something like a task management system such as Asana, while that's not necessarily made to do the exact same things, it's better than nothing. You got to work with where you're at. Some of you don't have the resources to put it, to have a work order management system. But anyway, you need to have that list of your assets. Then you can actually have the life expectancy of each one of those assets, so you know approximately when you're going to have to replace that asset. You also know in the coming years, okay, this is the maintenance that's most likely going to have to be done to this asset. So instead of our former church being surprised by, you know what, we budgeted the same as last year's M&R budget, but we didn't expect that we're going to have to replace a roof, and we didn't have that extra $20,000 in our budget for this. And then it's having to be stolen from other areas of the budget. Well, if they knew how to put this together so that they knew when that roof was installed and approximately when it was going to need to be replaced, they'd have been able to budget for that. But that's just one asset. So sometimes it's one of those years where it's coming up and you might have 5-10 assets that are expected to come to the end of their life cycle. Now, not every asset hits right on what their expected life cycle is. Some of them die before, but if you care for them properly with preventive maintenance, you'll have a lot of them that actually outlive their expected life cycle. So even if you put it in the budget that year and the asset is still performing well, and you're looking at your data, like we talked about, how you can look at the assigned expenses for each asset, and it's not jumping off the board, then hey, you might be able to go another year, another 2 years with that asset and roll that money over in the budget, keep it in there for the capital expenditures, but it can roll forward, and then you're still prepared for when that happens. So I think, something that we found along that route was that was really frustrating to the leadership of our church. Like, there were a couple times where they had a big vision with, okay, this is what we want to accomplish this year, whether it's through events or just community outreach. And there were a couple of times where those unexpected expenses, it's, hey, we got to see if the congregation can help out, or we do have to take that money from a different area that we budgeted. And we don't want you to have to do that. We want you to be able to plan your budget, and emergencies will always happen in facility management. But if you've got a good facility management plan, you're going to cut that down tremendously. Your budget's going to be a lot more accurate. You're going to be able to put your money towards the things that you want it put to. instead of spending that extra time and money on all of these emergency expenses, because inevitably a planned replacement is much cheaper than an emergency replacement on any asset that you have across the board. So you'll save money on that as well. So
Yeah, and
go ahead.
in addition, I mean, we've talked to multiple churches who put off maintaining what they currently had because the long-term plan was a new building. And so they were, you're excited about the new building, you want to put stuff towards that, but in both cases, it ended up not working out, where the new building didn't make sense, and then they were way behind on preventive maintenance, and they had no real budget. Like,
Exactly.
without having the right data, you can't plan for the year ahead, but even, what the next big project is, like a new building or remodel, you just really gotta know the numbers.
Yeah, and we talked about the numbers at the beginning with, $5 to $8 per square foot for M&R. And I don't think that I expanded on this, but that is going to differ for every facility. Obviously, if your facility, a lot more of your square footage is simple hallways, it's going to cost you less to maintain. If you've got a lot more restrooms than the church on the road, your maintenance is going to cost more because you're inevitably going to have more issues with your plumbing or your restroom fixtures. They just cost more to maintain than a hallway. So it's also, we don't know, you might know and you might not know, but your deferred maintenance. So deferred maintenance is basically maintenance that was not done when it needed to be done. So it's been kind of kicked down the road. So catching up to that 100% is impossible. But if you do have a lot of deferred maintenance, most likely your assets are not going to live as long as if they're maintained properly. And it might cost you a little bit more for a couple of years as you basically get back on track. So with your budget, you want to make sure you're planning ahead. Don't just throw a number out there and say, you know what, we're going to put 100,000 this year towards our maintenance or repair budget because you know what, that's all we can afford this year. And you just throw that out there. It's never going to work out for you. You want to take actual data. I know that for myself, sometimes it's hard when you know that the data might not tell you what you want to hear. You might not want to look at it, but honestly, that's the only way that you can make short-term and long-term improvements with your budget. So you want to use actual data to plan out your budget. One thing that we do, and lots of companies can do this, but are called FCAs, facility condition assessments. So like Stephanie and I really love honestly doing these because we get to meet a lot of great people and see different church buildings, and they're all interesting. So what a facility condition assessment basically does is a professional comes in, they go through your entire building, and they're gonna talk to whoever is in charge of your assets and get as much information as they can beforehand, your floor plans, your construction documents, and any information you have about your assets. Like I said, if you've got a work order management system, then great. You might actually know what assets you have and how old they are, who the manufacturer is, and all of that stuff, which, is a great start. But that facility condition assessment takes it a step further. But a lot of people aren't even at that step.
So yeah, one thing we've seen when going in and doing facility condition assessments and talking with the people in the building is often the person who knows your building the most might not be, if you're in charge of the finances or the head pastor. It's the person who's doing the most amount of work on the building. They have just crucial information about your building. They know what constantly leaks, what they're constantly having to fix. So tapping into that person's knowledge when you're budgeting is really helpful.
Yeah, and like Stephanie was saying, so whether you have a facility manager or a volunteer facility staff, or maybe you contract out a lot of your facility maintenance, they should partner with you and give feedback. But another another person or people that are often overlooked, and they're included in that budget where I said $5 to $8 a square foot, is your janitorial staff. Like they are often overlooked, but they are so important. They're helping maintain that building, and they usually know every part of that building from the floor to the ceiling across the entire facility. They're going over it weekly at least. And we found out that they are the ones who a lot of times know the building most intimately.
Yes, and well, and this is a side note, but so we used to own a commercial cleaning company, and it for your janitorial staff, custodial staff, it is, or volunteers doing it even. It's a very thankless job. You only hear things when people have a complaint about something that wasn't done right or, needed to be done. So just take a moment and thank those people that help keep your church clean and ready for your congregation and community.
For
Side
sure.
note, but
No, that's great. I truly believe in that. And that's also how you build a strong volunteer team. And I talked about that in a previous video, but it is.
And we have a training on volunteers coming up in I think a couple months, or I think it's November. So
okay. So back to the facility condition assessment. As we were talking about, like all of those people come into play and can add a lot of information. But when we're in a building, we are gathering information on all of the assets, your flooring, your roofs, your HVAC system, all your plumbing and electrical, everything that we can gather. And we want to gather like I said, the make, the model, and we want to gather the manufacturer. I don't think I said that. And then what year it was either manufactured or installed. From that goes into our end report that we're going to provide, because what we do as we're going through, we look at the historical data as well as the visual data that's in front of us, and we assign a condition assessment score to each of those assets, so that not only can we tell you how old your asset is and approximately when it needs to be replaced, we can tell you what the condition is right now of the asset. Now, you could deep dive after that and have a specific professional come out for your HVAC and then for plumbing and on and on. But these asset scores are pretty close to telling you the entire story of the condition of your asset, because it takes into account the age of the asset and the visual appearance of the asset. And if you have any historical data, that helps us build it out as well. But so we'll go through the entire building depending on your facility. It could be one day, it could be a week, and we get all the information. So we're checking out each area, and then we compile that information into a report that provides so much knowledge for you. So it tells you a complete list of all of your assets. So if you don't have that previously, that's important.
Including their location,
yes.
where you can find them, or your volunteers or contractors.
Which you definitely need to put into your system, whatever it might be. It shows you the manufacturer, the model, and the year it was either installed or manufactured. Along with that, it shows you when, or I guess each asset has an expected life cycle, so it's on there, but we show you when that asset is expected to reach the end of its life cycle. You'd be surprised how many times we go through and someone might still be using an asset that, according to the industry standards, it should have been replaced 5 years ago.
Or longer.
Yes. And, sometimes, as I said previously, some assets just outperform that lifespan. It doesn't mean you just have to replace it because that's the average lifespan. But if you don't have the data, you don't really know if you should have kept it going, because literally we've come across some AC condensers where it would have saved the church money to replace it because it already went well past its life cycle. But instead, because they didn't have the data to really see how much money they were putting into it, they were just responding, hey, our air conditioning's out and constantly calling a company in, and a lot of times one person might call them one time and then next time a different person. But they has spent thousands of dollars extra, as well as time lost. I don't think we talk about that enough, but time lost, especially with a church, is sometimes opportunity lost. You want to put your best foot forward each time, you know? I mean, I think since we're little kids, we talk about first impressions. So whenever there's a visitor in your facility, inevitably, no one's perfect. You're going to have an issue at some point, but you want to reduce that possibility as much as possible. You know, we hate to have someone show up for the first time and it's 95 degrees outside and your air conditioning went out because it wasn't properly maintained or whatever it might be. But, you know, so we try to eliminate those. So I'm sorry, back to what I was saying.
I was gonna say real quick, we do have a video on when to repair, when to replace an asset. So we're really working to build out a lot of these common questions on our channel. So check there, but they're revealing for that video if you want to hear more about, you know, debating between do I keep repairing this or is this time to replace it?
And that's perfect, because that's kind of what I'm talking about here, is because they did not keep track of how much it was costing them, both in time and in money. They just kept fixing an old condenser that was now inefficient, which their utilities were going up somewhat. But the worst part, like I said before, to me personally, obviously the money's a big issue, but how many times that AC condenser was not working when it was counted on, whether it was a service or whether it was just a community gathering or whatever it was. You want to be able to count on your assets. And that one, because they didn't know, they weren't doing anything on purpose, but because they didn't know that they should actually look at just replacing it instead of repairing it, it ended up costing them a lot of time and a lot of money. So those are the kind of things from the FCA you would see, okay, this asset is expected to need to be replaced this year. You can actually group it so that you can see in the upcoming years. We like to do 10 years ahead of time. So with it being 2025 and 2026 and 2027, 28, so on, like you can see what your expected capital expenses will be for replacements of these assets. We also use an industry standard and an inflation rate to estimate what that will cost you in 5-10 years. So obviously it can be a little different than that number, but it's going to be close. And that's going to allow you to really budget. So that facility condition assessment tells such a story about your building. It tells your building's only as healthy as the assets. And even with a facility condition assessment, we're looking at basically the things that we can visually see. So if there's a lot of cracks in your foundation, we're going to be noting that. If there's a lot of safety hazards, we're going to be noting that. If there's your exterior facade has a lot of issues, maybe it's brick and it needs to be tuck pointed and you're getting moisture penetration in there, we're going to be noting that. So with the report, you're also going to get basically a page of discrepancies of issues that have to be addressed. And then the highest priority, we've got them sectioned off in different areas. Safety things will always come first, but some of your assets, maybe it's a roof, maybe it's a window, are actually needing immediate attention, because if you don't address those assets, they're going to have a different asset be damaged. If you've got a leaking roof, eventually, if it's coming through, then your ceiling is damaged. Maybe it's above the light fixtures. Maybe it's getting down to your wood floor. But that's something that we look at, and obviously we prioritize to be replaced.
One thing I think this is really helpful with also for budgeting is if you're the person in charge of creating the budget, there's a lot of people involved in church leadership, usually elders, just different roles. And what we see is different people have different ideas of where the money needs to be budgeted, or what needs to be updated or remodeled, or just there's a lot of different opinions. So when you bring in someone else to kind of give you this picture, the data, the specifics, it kind of removes that I don't know what the word is I'm looking for,
It
but
removes that tension between different departments.
yes,
fighting
it's
for
like, this is,
money.
third party coming in, giving you this information that, it's just the facts. It's not opinion, it's not, there's emotion tied to it. It's just literally, here's what the numbers are. This is what the picture of your building looks like, for budgeting purposes. And then you can see kind of what the priorities actually are. So it kind of can help smooth things over.
And honestly, to sum up, this whole video is what Stephanie kind of just said is we want you to be able to make budget decisions based on facts. So you have to know what assets you have. You have to know what condition they're in. You want to look at your historical data, and putting those things together can help you create a budget that is going to be as accurate as possible, which is going to benefit you and your congregation greatly going forward. It's going to allow you to plan for growth, for replacement of assets, and all of that. So that's really what we wanted to get across today. I don't know if you had any other things you wanted to hit on.
Well, yeah, I guess just as kind of like a question and answer type thing is, that we kind of hit them with a lot of information. But so if they're in the process of like, hey, I'm trying to budget right now for 2026, what's like a 1, 2, 3 simple things that they could just implement right away?
So a couple things that you want to implement right away is, like we said, an FCA is so helpful. You might not be able to get that done in time. So what you want to do is look at your past budgets. What you want to do is then see if you do have the information on any of your assets, if you can get from a professional, like what is the expected life cycle of your assets? Because if you have the numbers, you can start computing these yourself, so you get an idea of when these are going to need to be replaced. But a lot of churches don't even have that information. So I think that's a little bit deeper dive than what Stephanie's asking. So just the basic thing to get ready is, okay, what did we do last year? You want to build in at least a 3% inflation for this coming year, and you want to plan as much as you can. If you do know, if any of your facility, if you have a facility manager, or if any of the volunteers have noticed anything with your assets, or your janitorial team, or your outside contractors, talk to them. Your HVAC contractors, a lot of times, they're messing with your air handlers and your furnace or your condensers, and they're probably going to be able to give you an estimate of, hey, I'm glad you asked. I think that this particular piece of equipment is going to need to be replaced this year. You can put that in your budget. Ask those questions. If you're paying them for a monthly or quarterly service to help you out, they should be more than willing to provide that information. Plus, it's more business for them. So most of the time, they're more than willing to say yes. Especially if you trust them, then you can put that in there for a replacement. But to start out, take what you've done before, and hopefully if you have any notes that you've busted your budget or it was too high, make some small adjustments. But for the long term, you really want to get yourself a facility condition assessment, so you've got a baseline, so you can move forward with confidence that you have the data, and then what to expect over the next 10 years. So that's really would be the first thing that I would advise anyone is look. What someone can't take away from you is your historical data. What you've been budgeting and how it's worked out for you. Like I said, then reach out to the people that have actually been maintaining any of your assets. They'll give you a lot of insight. So that's where I would start.
Okay, another question.
Okay.
What are there any common areas that you see from all your experience, either with churches or different organizations, that are overlooked when planning a facility budget?
Um, yeah, I'm gonna actually answer this in two ways because I'm gonna answer this. There's a lot of common things that I see that churches could reduce their expenses and their budget, and there's a lot of things that are overlooked. So, okay, a lot of churches honestly don't have even that outside contractor that is doing, in particular, I keep talking about HVAC, though those are assets that have to be maintained throughout the year. You have to change belts, you have to change filters, you need to make sure that it's lubricated. Your coils for your condensers should be cleaned at least once a year, preferably twice a year. Those coils allow air to that condenser. And if those coils are clogged, that condenser, the motor is working harder and it's heating up and it is shortening its life cycle. So sorry, that's just a little maintenance thing, but a lot of churches don't even have like anyone maintaining this.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that you start with having a trusted professional help you just, okay, what is your most basic maintenance plan for the next year until you get everything lined out that we can do. They can help you set up a couple of things just to get off the ground. And you know what? Most of the time, most churches have some volunteers. But if those volunteers don't know what you want them to focus on, a lot of times those things aren't focused on. So I had just said, hey, it's great if you don't have your own personnel to have a contractor do like your maintenance on your HVAC. But this is also an area where churches spend too much money. You know, they can reduce their costs a lot of times based on what is provided. Because if you're shown how to change your filters and you've got a couple of volunteers that are willing to do that, most of the time, if they're a little bit handy, they can change the filters in your HVAC equipment without you paying the cost of a service call for the company to come out. Some people might even be able to change the belts. That's a little bit more technical. And a lot of your people can be taught honestly how to clean the coils. They might not be, you still, I would suggest having a professional, or if you have a facility manager, they might be able to do it, but lubing the system, checking it like that once a year. But
Yeah, if I can jump on this too, is that was one thing I wanted to mention before we wrapped this up is, a way to possibly reduce a budget a little bit is building a volunteer team. And we throughout moving to different states, we've had to find different churches, try different churches. And the one thing I consistently see is when churches ask for volunteers, they're asking for greeters, childcare workers, youth leaders. I never see them asking for facility volunteers, and it's such a huge missed opportunity both for the church and being able to possibly reduce the budget on some things, but also to open the door in a way for people with these skills to be able to serve the church in a way that they're comfortable, confident, and to create a way for them to be able to really use their gifts and talents to benefit the church. So Dustin's done a video on this before with volunteers. He's built, a large team of volunteers himself for a church, and it was incredible seeing the way these people came together, filled these different roles, and were happy to serve the church in that way. And I think it's just overlooked a lot. So I think it's something we'll be talking on more. And we'll have more resources coming out about building your volunteer team. But anyway.
No, I think that was great that Stephanie just said that, because that's dead on. That's one of the biggest way you can save money on your budget for your facilities, for your facility maintenance, I should say. And we've seen time and again that it takes a lot of people to keep a church running.
Mhm.
And if some of those people can be volunteers instead of you hiring it out, not only does it save you money, it gets people that are invested in your church
Mhm.
more involved.
Yes.
You know, and if you build that team right and treat them right, you know, it's just gonna grow. They're gonna be even more loyal and more committed, and they're gonna be able to do a lot more tasks than you think. You'd be surprised at across these churches, all of these skilled men and women who might not say anything. Maybe they're quiet. Maybe they don't even know that, hey, you'd be looking for their help. But like Stephanie said, if you're willing to include them and looking for a volunteer team, you can really create and put to work a great volunteer team. So good point. Just
Sorry,
real,
back to
no,
here.
just real quick, a couple other areas that you can definitely save money on pretty quickly is I had mentioned before, make sure that your door and window seals or weather stripping is actually on your doors and windows and that it's not damaged, but it's in good condition. Make sure that things like lights, whenever you can put different areas of your church, if you can put them on a timer or a motion sensor, that's great. I like having the override system also, so that like on Sundays, if that's the day that you're having service, you can just make sure that they stay on for this time. But throughout the week, a lot of churches will have small groups, things going on. The office might be open, and we continually see, oh, that part of the building, the lights are on all day long whenever no one's over there. And you want people to be safe. So if they walk over there, it's at least a motion sensor that it turns on. But that's a great savings. So those are just a couple areas that you could save in pretty quickly. But did you have anything else you
I
wanted
think
to?
that's all.
Okay. Well, we just wanted to thank everyone who's taking the time to watch the video. And like we said from the start, this has been, you know, I think an emotional week for a lot of people, particularly Christians. And you know, I think that you know, we're going to see a lot of people at least coming to see what this is all about. Why is someone willing to go out there and speak the truth if it could get them killed? Why is it so important that they're willing to even do that? And when they do show up, hopefully all your different teams, your outreach teams, everything are ready. And you know, from our perspective, and we hope that your facility is welcoming and well maintained and just ready to invite those visitors in. So we wish everyone a great day, and thanks for joining us.